Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing very well. A week ago or so, we did a video showing the cost of contemporary air-to-air weapons or air-to-ground weapons, and it was just interesting to see how expensive the weapons has got. $500,000 for an AIM-9X, over $1 million for a modern AMRAAM. You know, it's getting outrageously expensive. And you guys, of course, your follow-up question was, or your follow-up demand was, okay, now do this for aeroplanes. So let's go and do this for the airframe. So lots of disclaimers to make. The first and obvious one is that looking at the unit cost of airframes, service airframes, is an incredibly complex thing to do. It's too complex to do very accurately in a small little chart like this. So you take it with a pinch of salt, treat it as, kind of average costs. The next thing is this chart here was originally started off by our member Davros. So everything that is in a non-coloured cell is done by Davros, and that's going to make it kind of irrelevant, as we'll see in a minute. Everything that's done in a coloured cell, pink or that peach colour, is done by myself and RC to a new spec. And our new spec is that we have converted the original costs, or the known cost, through to new money. So if we take an F-14 for instance, it's going to be 38 million in fiscal year 1998, giving it a new cost, a cost of 2020 of 60.3 million. Now when we look at costs, there's only really point in comparing them if we're going to compare them inflation adjusted. So that's what we've done with the coloured cells. The white cells don't really mean anything because they're not inflation adjusted. Those costs may be from the 50s. Those costs may be from this year. So hence, we're only really looking at the coloured cells today. As well as that, the fly towers is all Davros's work. I haven't investigated that at all, so can't take any responsibility for that. And this is all Davros's work. Thank you for doing that, Davros, for getting started. Regards what myself and RC have done, we've investigated from several different websites. I'll give you a flavour for the type of website that we've taken information from, Federation of American Scientists, and we've taken them for 2 or 3 others. We found that there are discrepancies, as you would expect, because this is a very complicated matter, of up to kind of 15% in terms of cost across different websites. So what we've done is we've ended up taking the average cost of a particular fiscal year, if there are differences between websites, to mitigate the errors as best we can. There are still going to be plenty of errors in here, obviously, but it should be relatively near to the truth. We've chosen planes that we use in DCS a lot, and some contemporary ones as well, like the F-22 Raptor, the F-35 Lightning, that it's relatively easy to get modern costings for. So let's start with the AV-8, or the B version, the AV-8B. The unit cost is 27 million, and that was fiscal year 1996, giving it a modern day cost of an AV-8B. If you could buy one, essentially, it would be the equivalent of 44.5 million American dollars, which is actually quite expensive. I never thought it would be that expensive. If you look down here, it's the same as, an F-16. Any idea why that's so expensive, RC? Because we're not talking about attack radars or anything, are we?
No, I have no idea. I mean, it all goes down to the development of it, right? So not necessarily what's in it. They're going to take the production costs or the development costs and
So the unit cost,
add that into the unit.
What you're saying is that the unit cost depends on how many were bought, right? So if thousands were bought, the unit cost is lower. If only one was bought, then the unit cost is massive because of all the R&D and research. So
but also, if they let's say you have a jet, and one jet you put in development costs are $1 million, and the other jet the development costs are $100 million. The $100 million jet's unit cost is going to be quite a bit more than the other one.
Yep, exactly.
So it all kind of goes into play.
Right. So, yep. That's that. So that's more expensive than I thought it was going to be. And that's what we're really looking at today. How things have got more expensive over time. Because that's what we were looking at the missiles. And have the planes kept pace with the increase in the missile costs? That's what we're really looking at today. F-14 Tomcat, really an important one here. Now, we're not sure what version it is. It's quoted as fiscal year 98. So I'm going to guess it's a Delta model, but I don't really know, so I put a question mark. So 38 million as of fiscal year 1998, giving it a today cost, if you could buy one freshly manufactured with whatever unit run was relevant, of 60.3 million. That's actually kind of less than I thought it would be, but then again, it was, made a long time ago, 60s, 70s or whatever. So you know, I guess it makes sense that it's going to be less, even adjusted for inflation. F-15 Charlie model, $31 million as of fiscal year 1998, giving it just under 50 million. So it's just a little bit less than the Tomcat. But remember again that the Tomcat was going to be before this in terms of time. The F-15 Echo, 43 million for fiscal year 1998, adjusted just under 70 million dollars. So we're getting on for some serious wedge at this point at 70 million. More expensive equivalent than the F-14. FA-18, this is a Charlie model, 40 million, which is, didn't dream that this was so expensive, the F-18. I didn't think it was, I mean, the whole idea of, I thought the F-18 and the F-16 was that they were meant to be the lightweight and therefore the cheap fighter project, weren't they? But I guess this is a long way from what the YF-17 promised to be. I guess they build it up and they build it up until it was made expensive. And I've just realised I just missed the F-16. So if we go back to the F-16, again, meant to be cheap, maintainable fighter, Charlie model, 26.9 million of 1994 fiscal year, giving us an equivalent of 47 million. So it still essentially costs as much as an F-15C in terms of equivalence. Again, you know, this doesn't take into account different blocks. Different blocks are going to have different associated costs. Again, we're kind of talking averages here, I guess. So FA-18, 40 million and equivalent new costs of 63.3 million. The Rhino, the FA-18 Super Hornet, 60 million as of fiscal year 1998, giving it 95.2 million. So really expensive stuff now, like F-35 expense now. And I've no idea why that is. If you guys know, then discuss.
It's probably because they had to redesign the airframe for the dual cockpit one or the tandem ones. And that probably entered into it.
But you've got to ask yourself, should that make it as expensive as a brand new stealth fighter bomber? Just saying.
Well, I mean,
it is. It's expensive as an F-35. You know, it's
and all the avionics upgrades and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. That was all done before the F-35 came around.
And that's what we're looking at today, really. Have fighter planes actually got a lot more expensive, like the missiles have, in terms of equivalence? And I think we're going to find some interesting questions. We've got the Big Daddy, the F-22, which everyone knows is super expensive for whatever reason. I don't know. You know, it is. We'll take it with a slight pinch of salt, but 150 million in 2009 fiscal year, giving it about 181 million roughly. I've seen numbers up to 200 million banded about with the the modification work that had to be done. Even sometimes up to $250 million. So really expensive plane at that point for the F-22. The 35 series.
Probably why they're out of production now.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Mm-hmm. F-35s are not as bad as I thought. The Alpha, the Bravo, the C with the unit costs to... Actually, I'm not going to say because I don't really know. But the unit cost, official unit cost, as of fiscal year 2014 is thus. And modern day costs, equivalency is going to be 100 to 130 roughly million. And then again, you're pretty much this, not much more than an equivalent Rhino, basically, which I find interesting. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Now, if we scale back really far, even pre-Tomcat, we're looking at an F-4E of 2.4 million costs, and that's actually manufacturer cost in 1965 unit cost. Equivalent to see just under 20 million inflation adjusted. That's a really interesting figure. And we can compare that to the F-14. We can compare that to everything, actually. Really interesting figure. F-5. Now, you've got to be a little bit careful here because we're not talking about, I don't know what version it is, but this is a modern F-5 with modern avionics. This is a new F-5, if you like. We've got the NF version here.
The NF.
NF. Are you happy that's right, the NF? I don't know what the NF is. Okay, that's fine. And that is literally a new cost. It costs that much, about $22 million, plus or minus a couple of million, depending on some factors. So one thing you can immediately take away is the equivalent costs difference, inflation adjusted, of an F5 now essentially costs more than an F4. And that's a really interesting figure if you start to dissect that. We've got the A10, I believe it's a Charlie model. I'm not sure what block again. Again, we haven't got information on blocks. 18.8 million is the best we can get for fiscal year 2015, giving us 20.5 million. Again, more than the F4E Phantom. So
That one's easy. That's the titanium costs huge money for that plane.
I mean, it's not that expensive. It's the same as an
Expensive.
F5. It's the same as an F5. It's not, it's not F22, F35 expensive, is it?
Right.
It's relatively good value
But given
for money.
what the airframe is, it's simple. It's a simple airframe, but it's just made to be. It's armored, bullet resistant. So
So, in my view, yes, fighter costs have gone up. So the F4 from the 60s, from the early 60s, 20 million is going to get you a Phantom in today's money, and a brand new fighter bomber that is going to be equivalent, I guess, with the F-35. I know the F-35 has 5th gen tech, obviously stealth and whatnot, which is going to ramp up the cost, but still, it's about 5 times as much to 6 times as much as what the equivalent plane costs. So yes, obviously, fighter planes, cost of fighter planes, fighter bomber planes has gone up seriously, kind of 5 to 6 fold, depending on complexity. And again, if you look at what would be considered really expensive planes for the time, F-14 was the top for its time. Apart from, I think, the F-111, I think was probably the most expensive fighter bomber ever made in its time, and its equivalent cost nowadays is 60 million. Well, if we go to an F-22, which is the top daddy, the most expensive one, nearly 200 million. So getting on for 4 times as much. So they've definitely gone up. I don't think they've gone up as much as the cost of weapons has gone up, though. So we're seeing up to kind of 5 to 6 fold maximum increase, but weapons, I think, it's gone up a lot more than that, although I've got no charts to really show that off. So those are the costs that we've got here. I've showed you how roughly we've worked them out, and we're roughly where we've got our information from. Now it's you guys' job to discuss that and see what conclusions you can draw from that. Is the F-16 really a bargain with a modern cost of 47 million? I don't know. It's basically the same as an F-15. Is it as good as an F-15? Anything you want to add? There's not many more conclusions I can really draw from that. Is there anything you want to add to that, RC?
no, nothing from me.
I hope you enjoyed that, and see you later.